Good deal. So any of that other banter didn't need to be in there anyway.
And I think George said he's going to be there. Me here. I told Rick about it. He said he thought he might have already been subbed to your channel, but it wasn't sure if he was anymore. But I told him what we were doing, what time, so he might show as well. So, and of course, I did the announcement in the group, so hopefully we'll get some people.
Yeah. I think
We
I
can,
saw
we
Scott.
can go.
Nope, you go ahead.
I was gonna say we can go ahead and start because sometimes there we got one person, so we can go ahead and be off and running.
Yeah. So as far as showing out just what we've a few albums that we've been listening to, do you want to just one of us knocks out a few and then the other, or are we going to do kind of like one,
Yeah, we can knock out and then the other person go. I don't see any point really going one to one because I might show more than you might show more than me, but I don't. I really only was planning on showing like three.
Yeah, that's what I had pulled out three. Of course, I've listened to a bunch more in the last week, but just three that were kind of top of the list.
I don't want to show too many because they're going to be on my video next week anyway, or this week anyway. So,
okay,
you want to go ahead and go first?
Sure. Testing out my glare here. I don't know which way. There we go. Still got a little glare there, but this is the newest Epica. Titled Spiral. And I've only got one other studio album by them, and I've got one of their lives. And it's, good. I guess anybody who knows Epica, it's probably not any different than, what they've done in the past. But there's little bits of elements of some death metal thrown in there with some growls, and it's got a good mix to it. So I got it at a good price. I figured, what the heck, I'll give it a shot. Plus the album cover, just it intrigued me because
it's very interesting looking. Yeah,
each one of those hands is being pierced by these spikes that are coming out. I have no idea what where that came from.
Colin Gill, you know him?
Say the name again, Colin. No, I
Well, hi, Colin, and hi to Aku. Hoping I pronounced that correctly.
All right. Next time, I think I'll try and remove the plastic from the sleeve so there's less glare. But Millennial Rain, this is their third LP, and this one is World on Fire. It was released last year. New singer, female fronted. And this band played at Immortal Fest 2 weeks ago. And even though I wasn't there, I did get the live stream. And despite the fact that the singer had a broken leg and had to sit during the performance, the band was fantastic. She was a sport for having to sit and perform.
Yeah, not the easiest to sit and perform.
It reminded me of Ozzy. I mean, obviously, Ozzy had just done that, the month before.
Dave Grohl did it. In fact, he donated his throne to Axl when he hurt his knee, when Axl was fronting AC/DC.
Cool. And the third one that I pre-ordered a few months ago, the new Alice Cooper. And I mean, the album cover alone makes it worth purchasing.
Oh, yeah.
The music is great. To me, this just takes up right where the original band left off in the 70s. I think it was 74, the last time that the guys did a full length together. Of course, they had done a little live performance a few years ago that was released, but this is all brand new music, and Cooper sounds fantastic. So, like, we've been talking about.
That's what I've been hearing about that one. I haven't gotten a chance to grab it, but that's what I've been hearing.
It's great. It just screams 70s, but of course, Alice still sounds as good as he did.
I thought his album, Road, was kind of going back to the 70s a bit too.
Yeah, Yeah, there's been a bunch of albums that he's done in the last 10 years that have been slightly retro sounding. I mean, some of them are maybe a little more. There was one, the one with Detroit in the title, very
Yeah.
reminiscent of that Detroit sound from the late 60s, early 70s. So, yeah, those were three tops on my list from this past week.
For a couple of people that have said hi, just want to say hi back. I'd always kind of steered away from Epica because I thought they were like in that vein of like Nightwish, to very kind of symphonic metal stuff. I don't typically get into.
Ditto. It's not my go-to, but to be honest, this album reminded me of Therion.
Oh,
I'm really big into Therion during the late '90s and early 2000s. Got to see them in Orlando, and there that's if that's considered symphonic. Then that band and that style I can handle occasionally. But yeah, Nightwish, I never really got into them.
yeah. I always was trying to figure out who the hell would name their kid Floor. That was, I guess, Wall was taken.
Yeah, that's one thing being a teacher. I've come across some very interesting names and very interesting spelling of names in the last 20 years.
Yeah. My mom tried to get me to go that route. She was in education before she retired, and I'm like, I like my kids. I don't know if I want to teach a whole bunch of other people's kids that I can't beat if I need to.
See, I get to send my kids home every day, though. I love teaching. I love the kids, but yeah, that's one thing being a teacher. You get a whole new set after a few months, and you just move on.
Well, you're probably teaching what, like high school?
Nope, nope. I've taught third grade, fourth grade, and fifth. So anywhere from about 8 years to 11 years old. That's my niche.
Yeah, I just don't know if I could do the teenagers these days.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't
Thanks.
think.
Hey, Ron's on. Hello, Ron. So we got at least one watcher that we recognize.
What, what, uh, I'll show four. Fuck it. All right, so I started off my weekend yesterday driving to go pick up my son, and I usually put a couple CDs in for the road trip because it's a 3 hour round trip for me to pick him up, and my daughter usually when I have them both. So I decided to put on Nostradamus from Judas Priest. I think this is
Mm,
uh, it gets a lot of flack and hate, and I
yeah.
think if people would approach it with the mindset of what it is and not what they want it to be, they can find more joy in it because I think it's a brilliant album. I think it really showcases Rob's complete range. I mean, especially on the title track alone. I mean, hearing him do those kind of operatic tenor vocals that you never really heard him do before. Um, and then somebody had commented because I posted it in a Facebook group, and they commented, "Well, there's too many mellow parts." And I was like, "Well, the mellow parts to me, for in that arena, really, they let the heavier parts stand out more than what they would if it was just like a heavy record all the way through."
Mm-hmm.
You know, um,
It
you know,
was a concept album. I mean, that's the thing. When you do a concept, you go where the story takes you, and that was the type of album where they could experiment. Try something different.
Ron says, "Loving the neon cross." What's up, Ron?
So yeah, I stayed away from the Nostradamus album for years. And I finally broke down and got it because I kind of bought into that. Oh, it's not priest. It's them going into some weird, and a lot of
Well,
people.
it
But
really kind of, I mean, it came off the heels of that reunion record.
mm,
Angel of Retribution, which is basically Painkiller Part Two.
yeah.
Quite honestly, and that's a fantastic album. But the second one is what I ended up finishing up listening to last night. Um, may not have heard of this band. This is called beyond description. The album is called Proof of the Truth, and these guys are a Japanese. It's called crossover, but it leans more towards hardcore than anything. I guess it would be considered like an EP because there's only 9 songs. It doesn't last very long, less than 20 minutes. I bought it thinking it was like a thrash album because I bought it at a record store that I don't normally go to. We every Probably about 3 times a year we have this thing called the Punk Flea Market, Southeast Punk Flea Market that comes to town.
Yeah.
I think they probably come towards Tennessee area.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of vendors, and it's not all music. You get people selling shirts and crystals and 30-foot snakes and all this other kind of stuff. Um, so the guy that owns Pharmacy Records, he's actually in Greenville, which is like 2 hours from here. So on my birthday, we went up there and did some shopping, and I picked this out and was expecting thrash, got hardcore, but I wasn't disappointed. It's kind of one of those things when you expect one thing and get another, you kind of it takes you a second to kind of click into what exactly you're listening to. So then once I, got that, part figured out, I was good to go with it.
Yeah, I saw you post that one online, and I had never heard of them. The album cover looks pretty cool, but
Yeah.
I've had that before. That's another topic, and I don't know if you guys have done it before. When you buy an album based on the cover, and it's nothing, it's nothing
Yeah.
like you.
I think any Molly Hatchet fan found that out.
Yeah, but I can think of, I won't get into it now. That's not our topic, but I can think of one that I actually brought back to the store. I had opened it and I not like it at all. And it's one that I'm sure most of the folks watching right now would know. Um, Sean, hello. And Sean posted, said that he listens to Malevolent Creation. Great,
Nice.
great death metal band.
And,
I've got
yeah,
a few of theirs.
probably one of the big, if you want to call it a big four of Florida death metal. You're going to
Yeah.
have more Angel, Obituary, probably Cannibal Corpse, and Malevolent. I think there, and then Deicide probably switches in and out. This is my next one is death metal themed. These next two actually I bought from Ron when he was in the process of getting out of his extreme vocal stage, which is fine by me because I got stuff. Um, False by Gorefest. This thing is just brutal, brutal, brutal. I
Yeah.
saved for the last thing I spun on the table last night because my wife was already in bed, and usually she's not apt to coming out and voicing her displeasure if she's already in bed. So uh, he just told me to shut up. So if my feed cuts out, you know that I pissed somebody off.
The Gorefest, that's a band I don't have any of theirs, and I've known of them since the early '90s. I think I had one of the songs on a comp, but yeah, if they re-release those, I could find some of the originals. I would definitely pick up some of them.
Yeah, definitely. And then the last thing I'll show real quick is one that you and I had talked about in Messenger, and it is Fearless Undead Machines from Deceased. Definitely more of a thrash effort than their earlier stuff. But this one is not a slouch in any way, shape, or form. It just doesn't really have the guttural vocals, which probably was to my benefit while playing it with my wife sitting there. But it's very kind of like technical thrash too. It's not, and Deceased in general is a very technical band as well. And just I sent you the message when I said when I put it on and that intro part comes on, and my wife's like, "That was a great movie," I was like, "Well, you're not going to hear the movie. You're going to hear this piece of awesomeness right here." So,
yeah, the guitar players, the twin leads, and just melody that those guys come up with. I think Mike Smith is one of the guitar players. Yeah, just that's one of my favorite albums. Just at least in the metal genre, I put that one probably top 5.
of course, you'd highly recommend it, Ron, because you're the one I bought it from.
Yeah, and especially he's saying that they kind of cross border between death and thrash, and especially that album on their earlier stuff was pretty. just full blown death metal. But everything that's come since has been
Yeah.
very thrashy.
What's up, Train Kill? We got more people than I thought we would. I was thinking George will he'll probably show up at some point. Sometimes we have to push back our videos when we do it with him because he's always the last to eat. I don't understand why. Prioritize. No, I'm just
Different
kidding.
time zone.
I mean, I would have been here a couple minutes earlier if I hadn't been a bonehead and knocked our shower curtain down. So yeah, it was one of those where the end part fell off. So then the entire curtain slid off the rod, and I had to put it all back through. But
Yeah, had those issues before with the shower rods. So
we could.
I'm gonna let you describe the topic because it was your brainchild and
Well, so first of all, what you're watching is a TMI production. TMI stands for Tim Music Incorporated, or you can call it two Tims for the price of one, however you want to call it. But this particular episode is just basically about um, asking each other questions from a collector's standpoint. So you'll probably hear a lot of what do you prefer, how do you feel, and we're not getting into any kind of therapy. So don't feel like it's going to be that way. It's just purely how do you go about collecting and stuff like that. So I'll let you go ahead and throw out the first question.
okay, put me on the hot seat here. So
Yeah.
yeah, when I came up with the three questions, I was like, I'm not sure if this is really fitting the format of what you had envisioned, but at least two of these are kind of can apply to me, and I so for you guys watching, definitely if you want to chime in, and what would you do? So here's the first question: do you spring for a exclusive, expensive, limited edition box set to be able to get all the albums from an artist that you love, where most at least half of those albums are not available? Do you end up buying that super expensive? I'm talking, well over $400, or
Right.
do you wait and just hope that they're going to start releasing those individually so you can get the ones that you need and not necessarily have to pick up ones that you already have?
Yeah.
And I've
So
got an artist in mind. I'll throw it
I
out.
wrestled with that on a few different ones. So like uh my record store has had a box set that has all of the 80s Ramones albums together. And it was like $140. And I'm like, I can't drop $140 on that. Like I can't justify it to myself when I know I can generally get the regular albums themselves because the all their studios have been reissued anyway. And I can that way it's kind of like almost what I call a payment plan to myself, where I can buy one record, one payday, buy the next one another payday. Even though technically now you have like, especially with Amazon and stuff, you have like afterpay where you can make payments on stuff and still get your stuff, when you get it, and that's fine. Um, but so that and the first five Motley Crue records were also in a box set,
Mm-hmm.
and we already had at the time, I think Girls, 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 and Shout the Devil. And so, like you were saying, when you buy a box set of something, you want to keep the box set part together. And then if you already have something, maybe you find somebody else to give those to. But for the Motley Crue instance, I didn't buy the Shout the Devil. My wife did. So I was like, I'm not even going to approach her about that. But like what I did do with the Overkill Atlantic Years CD box set. I had Horoscope and I Hear Black already on CD that I gotten off of eBay.
Mm-hmm.
But the CD box set comes with like little mini sleeves. They're not like jewel cases. So I wanted to keep all that together. So the two that I already had, I just gave to a friend of mine. So, but now mini box sets that I did buy because um they were kind of recent coming out, and they were um I wasn't sure if people were going to sell the ones individually, they would probably really try to rip people off. So like one of the ones was the Tony Martin era Black Sabbath box set that came out.
Yeah.
And so like when it originally came out, it was around like $90 for 4 records. And I was like, I'll wait. And then I happened to come on a sale with it on Amazon for like $60. And like as soon as I saw that, I put my hat in there and picked that up because they were being reissued, but they had been remixed and remastered as well.
Yeah.
And that era, um, originally when it came out, didn't have the best of production, and those albums kind of really got overlooked because of that. And so, and I had never really gotten to the point where I was listening to the Tony Martin era stuff. And Sabbath is my favorite band. And I know Ron will probably comment on here like he did with me before. How can a band be your favorite band if you don't like all their albums? Well, you can like a certain period of a band, you know, and that's what you want to stay with. But so I wanted to hear the better versions of those records. So I got that, and then I bought a 4 album set. The last 4 albums of Dio came in a box set. So I picked that up. It wasn't relatively too expensive. I think maybe it was like 114. But you got the last 4 records, and then you got a CD single of a song that was going to be on Magica Part Two. It's the same song on both sides, song called Electra, and I haven't listened to the single. I'm not a big single guy. I don't know if that's gonna be a question that comes up later. But anyway, so make a long story short, most of it's gonna depend on price, and um yeah, that's kind of like the main thing. And then depending on who bought the record that you may have already had before getting the box set, then it depends on whether or not I'm going to give the other copy away. Because if I didn't buy it, I can't justify just giving it to somebody.
Yeah. So the box set I was thinking of was the See You on the Other Side, the Ozzy box set,
I
because when
saw that.
all colored vinyl, it had all the live album, had, No Rest for the Wicked. It had ones that Osmosis that haven't been released either in a long time or they're just, bootlegs floating around. But I could not spend
I didn't
500
even look to
plus
see how much it
dollars.
was because I just knew, especially with his passing, that was just going to be ridiculously expensive.
Yeah. They just re-released it. I noticed recently, but a lot of those albums in the last 2 or 3 years have been released. Like Scream, just recently they
Yeah.
put it out there, and of
I think
course
it was
No
his
More
first time
Tears.
on vinyl, I think, for the screen record, because I don't think vinyl really started getting pressed again in 2010. It was probably about 2 or 3 more years later.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I actually picked that up not too long ago. And it's a fantastic album. I mean, in my opinion, the last great one that he really did.
Other parts of that box set will be released because there's a lot on there. Not that I need it.
There was like some stuff I didn't even know of before, like when it was going in between some of the records. I was looking like, okay, what is that? Is that a single? Is it what is it? It's
Mm,
got the I don't think Speak of the Devil was in there. Just say Ozzy was in there, but I don't think Speak of the Devil was in there. That was like the one like missing piece probably in there.
that's unusual.
Unless I just didn't see it when they were flipping through. But I mean, like No Rest for the Wicked's not an easy one to come by money wise. And that's my favorite. So right now I just have a CD.
Yep, same here. And let's see. Ron mentioned the Def Leppard '90s box set in Skid Row. The Def Leopards, I picked up the volume one and volume three, and the volume two, I was kind of waiting for it to go down in price, and it never did. And now that one's gone up in price.
The
And
funny thing is, the only thing different from the box set Skid Row and me buying the single individual records, um, there's a live EP, I think, that came in that Skid Row box set.
mm,
Again, the Atlantic years. But other than that, I have all the other ones. Was able to find them all for pretty decent prices. Subhuman Race, I think, was like less than $30. My wife ordered that one. I got Slave to the Grind for maybe like 25. Self-titled, I don't remember how much
mm.
that was. and I think the first one I actually got, I think, was the Beside Ourselves cover EP, and it wasn't too bad.
So Tim George is on, and he said he put hell, hell Tim times two, and he fixed his. He corrected himself. He meant to put hey.
Well, it happens.
Yep, typos.
Yeah, actually, I did. I did get that first Skid Row from Ron because it was a trade. Um, that I don't remember what I traded for, traded with, to be honest.
Oh, maybe Ron knows.
Ron, I would hope he would because he's the one I traded with. So, all right, I'll throw out my first question then. And this will probably be a dependent question, depending on like certain artists. But do you consider yourself to be a completist?
Do I consider myself to be a completist? No, no, because there's plenty of bands where I've got just one or two of their albums, and it's been that way for maybe 20 plus years now. If it's a band I really like, or if I find a band that I'm like, whoa, where have they been? Then I may try and hunt down, all their studio stuff. But as far as that can be crazy. There is a band that I'll bring up with one of my other questions where it kind of it's a similar question, but I think it's different enough that I can still use it. Um, yeah, there's some bands that I may have too, like uh, and because I've got maybe US press, and then I had the opportunity of getting like a German press that maybe it's a gatefold, and the US press wasn't. So,
Right.
but that's not because I'm trying to go the completest route, and
I guess maybe when I say completist, I'm saying more of like a band has 10 studio albums. Are you trying to get all 10 of those albums?
once again it depends on the band. Like Ozzy, I whatever studio album came after Osmosis, that was the last one I got. I
Down to
didn't
Earth?
like Scream and all the other ones that came after that. It wasn't until his most recent, and I forget the name of it, but the
Patient number 9?
Patient Number Nine. When that one came out, and I heard that Iommi was going to be on it, and Eric Clapton was doing some guitar work, I was like, this may be his last album. I'm going to buy it. And then I started, looking, okay, I'm going to go back and start, grabbing some of those other ones that I missed. But I kind of, I liked Osmosis. Down to Earth didn't do a lot for me. And then he was changing up his guitar play, band members, and there was all the garbage that went on with Sharon and the remix, re-recording, and I kind of got a little ticked off with Ozzy and Sharon, and but yeah, I said, I loved his music, but now other bands like Iron Maiden, I've got everything. Anthrax, I've got maybe not like a if they go back and do a re-record album, I may not get that, but as far as the true studio albums, typically I'll.
Yeah, so Maiden's actually funny that you mentioned Maiden because I'm opposite when it comes to them. Like, I have a majority of one I want from Maiden, and I've got the first 9.
Hmm.
I want the 2 that they did with Blaze, and I want Brave New World. After that, I could care less because they just didn't do it for me on subsequent recordings. They really tried to make every song 7.5, 8, 9 minutes long. It was a lot of repetition and not in a good way. It's it's like there's only so many bands that can play the same record over and over again, and you don't get tired of it, like ACDC or Motorhead or something like that. Um, I just thought it sounded like their creativity was gone, and I don't know if it's because they had 3 guitarists at the time now. What was going on there, but Dance of Death had a few songs. Matter of Life and Death was okay. Um, New Frontier was less than okay. Book of Souls was completely boring, and I thought um, the samurai one at the end. It, I I'm probably gonna go back and give it a re-listen. But it only really took kind of one listen for me to go. I'm definitely not paying the $65 that it was coming out to be paid for. Like, I'd maybe take it if somebody gave it to me for free so I could just have it in the collection. But I'm not, because you got some people that they're completists when they just want to have everything by a band, whether they listen to it or not. And if I buy it, I'm going to listen to it.
Yeah.
Like, for an example, so my wife got uh, probably about four or five Megadeth CDs off a seller on eBay, and one of them was the Risk album. And I can tell you right now, I have no desire to get that on vinyl because I listened to the first three songs, and that would be it. And I'm not justifying paying a vinyl price for three songs. If
Yeah.
they come out with a little mini EP that's got those three songs, fine. But to me, after Crush 'Em, and even with that song, that album goes downhill quickly, and you know
Mm-hmm.
I can't do it with that album. Now, I love the album before it, Cryptic Writings. I thought was really good. I felt like The World Needs a Hero was definitely a step in the right direction, of getting kind of back on track. But yeah, Risk is something. uh, I don't know.
I had no interest in that. I think a few of the songs showed up on the War Chest box set, and I picked that up. So I figure I probably have the best songs from that album on that, and
Right.
I wouldn't, I wouldn't splurge on vinyl that for the Risk album.
Ron says Scream was easily his best album since No More Tears. Jeff Beck was also on a couple of tracks on the was it that album or was it the Ordinary Man? No, Ordinary Man, he had like his producer playing guitar the whole way through, I think.
Yeah,
Then of
that,
course he had that duet with Elton John on the title track. Yeah, then he had like 9,000 guest guitarists on Patient Number 9. Rod says have every Anthrax studio album, every Metallica studio album, every Saxon studio album. Not sure what else. And
mhm.
the mention of Metallica, like I'm so torn with Saint Anger because
There's no torn here.
no, and well, the reason I'll say torn is because I've heard the um the bootlegged fixing of the snare. I've heard that, and to be honest, that snare fixing fixes a lot of problems on that album audibly. So, and I know there's bootleg copies of that out there. How much they're going to cost and where I'd be able to get them from is a different story. Um, but I
I just
don't.
wonder if that's something that an actual, Metallica had any part in that mix, or if it's kind of like where some
I
fan,
think,
what
yeah, yeah,
Jason said.
a fan did it. Yeah, because if Metallica did it, they'd be all over advertising that they did it, and it'd be in Walmart as soon as it came out.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously it's not they would have mass produced it and put it out there to make money. I was just wondering if it was maybe somebody who, one of the studio guys that had worked on it that went back and took the EQ and changed things, or I don't know.
I wonder
That
if it's
album
the same fan that did the "And Justice for Jason."
probably. Yeah. All
All
right.
right,
Ready for the
you're
next?
yeah, ready for you.
All right. So this one, there's shades of similarity, but I think it's different enough. So hypothetically, you have five versions of an album already, because that's that completist thing. A band that you really love, you got five versions, and you find out that they're releasing that album again. This time, it's a double LP, exclusive color, and there are 7 demo tracks on it. And this is a situation I'm in because I've got this I've got 5 versions of the album, whether it's cassette, it's different CD version, picture disc, and now there's another version coming out, which potentially has, but it's one of those awesome albums that everybody seems to love it. They acknowledge it, at least the tip of the hat towards it. So, do you buy another copy, or do you finally say I've got enough?
All right, so this is how I'm going to answer that one. First of all, I'm not in that situation because I don't have multiple copies of anything. As far as in the same media form. Now, there's some albums that we do have CD and vinyl of, and and that goes for a couple of reasons. I can't play my records in my car, and so like I'll just give you an example. When I got into Iron Maiden, they had just like 4 years prior, I think it was '95, they had reissued their catalog on CD.
Mm-hmm.
And if you put it in the computer, there's like you could get like music videos. And the first two CDs I bought were the self-titled and Number of the Beast, and they included a track that was a B-side on one of the other songs that wasn't on the original vinyl.
Yeah.
I don't know this because I'm just getting into Iron Maiden. I assume Sanctuary's on the self-titled. I assume Total Eclipse is on Number of the Beast. So then when I get my vinyl copies of these, I'm looking for the song and it's not there. So, I do a little research and find out, oh, they were B-side songs. And, so when they reissued um the albums, even the reissues kept those extra songs off, which I thought was dumb because you had plenty of room to put those songs on. Um so and I do have some like special edition, only because that's how it was when I saw the copy to buy it. I didn't care that like I've got Dehumanizer like that, Chaos AD like that, Arise, Beneath the Remains, some other stuff. Uh, I don't. I usually don't listen to the second disc because generally it's demos of songs that were already on the album,
Yeah.
and I don't really need to hear that. So if I've got, like, let's just say I've got a CD copy and a vinyl copy of, let's say, Black Sabbath Paranoid. There are no, you know, you know, editions that came after that with a bonus track here or there. I
Yeah.
mean, the first Sabbath album was different because the US and the UK pressings, one had Wicked World and one had Evil Woman on them. You didn't have both until Sabbath actually came out with a box set of the first 8 records. They had them on CD, and then they had on that particular album they had both those songs, and then had demo versions of the same songs on on the individual CDs.
Mm-hmm.
But I to me, I can only listen to one copy at a time. So why am I going to have you know the only reason I ever see buying another copy is to upgrade if my copy's not in great listenable shape.
What
That's the
about
only.
what about, like, so the Black Sabbaths, when they were originally released on CD here in America, they were Warner Brothers, and there was barely any information in the booklet. You got your the silver CD, and then during, I guess, late '90s, 2000s, I think maybe Castle Entertainment, somebody re-released them. They had thick booklets, pictures, remastered.
Right.
Would that be enough for you to say I'm going to replace that original '80s copy that I tracked down of Paranoid?
So okay, I'm gonna throw it back to an earlier part of our discussion and say it like this: if there's a box set like that, and I only have maybe 2 or 3 of the albums that are in that box set, I only have 3 of them currently. Then to be able to get them all at once, I'll do that, and then, like I said earlier, give the original copy that I had away. Um, I'm not that big on packaging as far as like booklets and stuff like that. Especially nowadays, because even with my reading glasses, it's still very hard to read the type that are in CD booklets. Never mind a cassette. Like, forget about that. I don't even know how I read those. I really don't.
That's back when we had eyesight. Now I have magnifiers.
Right. I mean, I'm like at the point where I feel like I need to go. Like Scott's got his little, like jeweler's magnifying glass thing that he looks at stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not even gonna go that bougie. I might have a like my great grandfather used to have this big old huge magnifying glass going over all this other stuff so I could see everything. I really don't care what people think of how I look when I'm trying to read something because I need to be able to read it.
Yeah. So Ron and guys, I've been reading the comments. You just obviously we haven't been able to address everything, but Ron mentioned the white snake slided in, and that's a good example where you've got two completely different recordings. So you got the American version, which John Sykes was, it was a little more metalized, I guess, and then you have the bluesy UK version. So yeah, that. If you're a fan of Whitesnake, that's kind of a no brainer, but I don't know how many people during the 80s knew that.
So I would say to me, I would probably just go with whichever one I liked better. I think that would probably be how I would
I
go about it.
new to the band though. Like you wouldn't have known it if you had, let's say it was 84 and you went to a shop that had imports, you might get the UK version. So you get that and it
Right,
sounds pretty reminiscent to everything that you've heard prior to, but if if it was kind of a crapshoot and you ended up getting the American version, then you were getting one that was a little more metallic, a little crunchier, had more.
right. So I mean, but so I guess maybe the way I would say it is, you know, once you get the information, there is another way, another version out there. That's
Mhm.
when I'm going to listen to both, see which one I like better, and then keep the one that I like better and get rid of the other one. Give it to somebody, sell it back at a store, whatever. Because I'm because so like to me, when somebody says, just like I'm sure you are just like I am, and most record collectors, we have like at least a notion of how many records we have, and so like you know if you have five copies of the same record, you know that says I have five records, but you really only have one as far as music is concerned. You only have like you kind of see where I'm coming from with that. It's like you have five records, but they're all the same thing. Is it really five records, or is it one and four spares?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So I just don't keep more than what I have or what I because also then too most collectors CD or record we do run into the problem sometime of not having enough space. So if I've got
Yeah.
50 copies of other albums that I already have, that's 50 other records I could have in my collection.
Yeah, that's a good point. See, I'm a hoarder, so and going back to your question, not a completist, but George said that he would repurchase the Kiss albums if they had extra stuff. Well, when they did their remasters, I went ahead and bought every single one again. It took time. It wasn't something I did within like a few months. It was probably a year or two, but I ended
Mhm.
up, and it was around the same time that they re-released their Chris's solo stuff on CD and Ace's stuff was available. And any so, but I repurchased them, and that I am, I wanted that extra information, the booklet, and whether or not they're really this was before the loudness wars. So where everything the EQ was just maxed out. So I heard a difference in most of the Kiss albums, but um then again, like Dress to Kill, a lot of people complain about the sound on that. I mean, even a remaster isn't going to necessarily fix what people think is lacking on an album.
Right.
But yeah, I was a Kiss fanatic at that point, and I was so, and I still have the originals too. So I've got got them all. So I've got two copies of just about every album,
Yeah.
or
And I think a lot of people get confused in remaster and remix.
yeah,
Because remaster doesn't do what everybody thinks it's going to do and fix issues. It's the remixing part. Are you bringing the bass level up? Are you, and that actually is going to
or
lead me.
replacing.
Yeah, I'm actually going to let this lead me into my second question. Um, where you fall on reissues, remasters, and re-recordings.
Okay. Remaster. I'm usually all on board for. I'm willing to upgrade. Um, Especially if it's a band that I really like. So let's say like Fate's Warning. If I have an original Metal Blade copy and they have a remaster, I'm probably maybe not as much now as in the past, but I was usually pretty big on those. Remix, I try carefully with that. It's the remix. There's some that I think are horrible. They just you hear horns in something where there wasn't horns, and it's like this is a hard rock song or a metal song, and all of a sudden somebody's playing trumpet. Not a big fan of that. So yeah, the Megadeths.
I
uh
was highly pissed off when there were horns into the intro track. I was even more mortified when my favorite song, Mary Jane, he comes in with these really horrible attempted ghost sounds. And I was like, what did see what happened was I was buying my collection over again on CDs.
yeah,
And
that album is a perfect example. I'm glad I held on to the original.
he did all this when he had the arm injury. So he had basically retired the Megadeth name, which is what he ended up getting into the situation with a junior over. So he went back and was doing things to the other albums. And it's like, okay, I figured, maybe he's going to brighten up some things on, especially the early '80s stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you know, it was like just stuff that didn't need to be put in.
Yeah,
Like,
Killing Is My Business is okay. That
uh,
one.
with the exception of there was like 9,000 bleeps in the cover of these boots.
Yeah, and I think that was copyright that caught up with him at that point.
Yeah. What you need? I can't see what that says. Huh? Is the car unlocked? Yeah. Sorry, my son.
Yeah, you're fine. So yeah, Killing, that one was doable, but I still there more often I'm gonna go back to the original. But so far so good that I
Yeah.
can.
When it comes to buying the CDs, because right now, record wise, I think the reissues are probably about the only thing you're really going to find for a decent price, especially the Megadeth back catalog. I don't see those original copies being very friendly to your wallet.
Yeah. Now
So the
the
records kind
the last part of your question was just a re-record,
of
and a
right.
lot of the thrash bands have done that. So Testament, I believe Exodus did that. Anthrax. Now, granted, if it's they got a new singer in and they want to do a new spin with a new singer, I can understand that.
I'm
Uh,
not a big fan of that part.
yeah, that's not. And
I
what
never, never
Ozzy
um,
replaced.
yeah, the Let There Be Blood. I never gave that a listen.
Yeah,
Um, because first of all, that album Bonded by Blood is, in my opinion, the greatest thrash album ever. Not just debut, not just greatest Exodus album, greatest thrash album ever. To me, it defines everything that is thrash in that album. Um, Diamond had re-recorded "Lightning to the Nations" with a new singer.
yeah,
Completely awful.
yeah,
Completely awful. I didn't like it at all. I think the music was okay because it's mainly the same people who wrote that. That's fine,
uh,
but
yeah,
no. But there is one instance where it was done correctly. So the Cavalera Boys went and re-recorded the first three releases
yeah,
of the Sepultura catalog, which desperately needed to be done. Maybe not so much schizophrenia, but the first two definitely needed better production, and
yeah,
they didn't overproduce them. They still retain a very good raw quality. It's two of the original members of the band, even though they didn't release it under the Sepultura name because they don't have the rights to it anymore. I get it, but I still put it in my Sepultura part of my collection.
yeah.
Um, so they are Sepultura albums. Um,
Made the logo look like Sepultura, with the
yeah,
cover.
yeah, right, exactly. Um, and can you put your clothes in the dryer and then put it on 60 minutes? Okay. So yeah, and that's where kind of like I get it because well, a couple of reasons why. One, like I said, the production really needed to be updated on those. Really did. And for two, trying to find an original copy of Morbid Visions or Bestial Devastation on vinyl
In good
for
condition.
for a
Yeah.
price that doesn't, cost like your mortgage,
Yep.
insane. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, so that's that's the reason why I approve of this one.
Yeah. And another one that I thought was good was the First Strike Deadly with Testament. There, yeah, they added that crunch that was showing up in the Gathering, Demonic, even Low,
Right.
and yeah, instead of going back and remastering the Atlantic albums, the earlier ones, they just went back in the studio and redid them, and I thought they did a good job. And even the two guess you would say bonus songs on that with Zetro,
Yeah.
the original singer, that they were good too. And so yeah, a few of the guys are talking about Exodus with Rob Dukes, and I'll be honest, I've never even listened to one of those albums.
I
Um,
don't. I
but
think
so in-
Exodus was very much able to do similar to like Iron Maiden when they changed vocalists. They were able to make the music fit the vocalist.
yeah,
And Trendkill says up here, Sodom did that comp. Regret buying it. Um,
that was recent,
yeah,
a couple of years back. I never got that. I've got most of their studio stuff, so I didn't see the sense in buying the Sodom redo.
yeah, really.
Acoustic, yeah, that and that's a good point, Ron. So go back and they're adding something different to it. So Kiss too, with the whether it's unplugged or if it's a symphonic, that
Right.
of course everybody was starting to get on both of those bandwagons. We're going to do an unplugged, acoustic, and then it seemed like a lot of were doing the symphonic with it or with an orchestra.
Yeah,
But
and that
that
that and as much as bands want to pile on Metallica, that was something Metallica spearheaded.
yeah,
They saw the success that they had with S&M and took off like bottle rocket or like rocket ships with that. I think Accept had one as well. I think they had a symphonic concert.
there's been a bunch of bands, but then again, we were talking about symphonic earlier, and a band like Therion, they may not have a full orchestra, but they're a band that has the opera singers and a few strings. So there's bands that we could say we're doing that style of music, just not on the same level that Metallica did it.
Well, Ron, what I meant by
Deep Purple.
spearheaded it in that time, because when Deep Purple did it, not a lot of the bands followed suit with it. And when Metallica did it, that's a different day, different age, more information is easily more accessible, and this, that, and the other. And you were able to see instantly how well that panned out for them financially. Another double platinum, multi platinum selling album. So that's kind of what I meant by they spearheaded. They spearheaded when like a bunch of bands decided to go in that direction. I'm not saying they were the first because I knew Deep Purple had one. Um, there was a man. I don't know if Floyd put it out or if it was like a covers album. There's a CD I saw years ago. It was called Symphonic Floyd. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not. I never picked it up. So I
There was
didn't. I was
one. There was one for the band, yes, too. So I think it was a company that was taking the band's music and orchestrating it.
okay. That makes sense.
I
That's
never.
kind of that's kind of what I thought it ended up being.
Yeah, George is saying some bands re-record albums so that they can get money for it. So many bands signed horrible deals when starting out, so they don't have the rights to the publishing rights to those songs any longer. And
I
so
thought I saw something where Snoop had said like after 7 years you're able to get the rights to your master back.
unless you sell them to Michael Jackson,
Right, which I was like, wow, are you serious? Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
We'll
So
just on to your next question.
yeah, my final one. This one's maybe not as maybe a little more lowbrow. So you're in a store and you find a record that you really want. You pull the record out. The record is near mint or better, but the album sleeve looks like it's been chewed on by a bird or rat or something, and it's, let's say, the price of the, it's something that maybe is not readily available, you're not going to find it everywhere else, but it's a decent price, maybe not super cheap, not expensive. Are you going to buy it if the cover is yeah, just torn up and looks like somebody chewed on it?
If it is an original pressing, I will buy it, and then with the hopes that at some point, either via eBay or something, find a suitable jacket to replace with.
Mm,
That's what because I actually have a couple that I don't necessarily consider to be crucial to my collection. I Blackfoot Tomcatin. There basically is no back cover to the jacket, um, but I got it for like $1 at a thrift store.
mm,
But
yeah.
like I said, it's not something I consider that be that crucial to my collection. But if I'll do that for that, then I would definitely do it for something that I have to have.
Yeah, I've got a copy of Operation Mindcrime where it's, there's a chunk of the corner missing. It's not a cutout. It's not a smooth cut. I have no idea what happened to it, but the record is probably maybe VG plus. It doesn't skip. It might probably have some light wear on it, but it's I know that's an album. I could go out and I could probably buy a newer copy. They've got the 2 disc version,
Yeah.
but I kind of rather just have it on one record. I
Well,
know that.
I got my copy of Scorpion's Love Drive for $6, and probably mainly $6
Yeah,
because of that.
that's what I'm talking about. So that's obviously not an animal eating. That's water damage and somebody
So
was, or
if the
it's stuck
stuck together or
to another
something,
record.
I mean, honestly, if it was going to be like that, I wish it would kind of be over the bubblegum part, um, just for this particular one. But
What does the record look like? What kind of condition is it
it's
like?
immaculate. I mean, it plays excellently.
Yeah,
So, like we said earlier, I listened to the album, not the cover. The cover's not any good to me if the record sucks.
yeah. Yep, the record has to the record has to be playable, and that's why I've had some that there's such dish warp is one where you have a little bow. I can usually, as long as I've got a good enough vinyl mat on my player, I can get it to catch and play. But when you've got vinyl that's like that, your needles, yeah, I'm not even gonna try it.
So I've been using this. I've been using this to um, measure how I make my dividers for my band dividers.
Uh huh.
Um, and I do it with every divider I make. I put about this much room over the top, and then I cut down here. This is that because I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and this thing is spinning like that, and the needle doesn't skip; it jumps. And yeah, so and I paid what I would consider probably a decent amount for this at a. It wasn't like a thrift store; it's like a what would you call it? Like a not a convenience store, but almost like a convenient market, if that makes any sense. Um, and yeah, so I was like, yeah, okay, now what am I going to do with this? And then my wife decided she was going to be funny, and I don't know if you can see this, but she blacked out everybody's eyes.
Oh, that's great.
That didn't come how it is. And then every time she sees it, why are those guys' eyes look that like that? I'm like, because you did it like that, like you were messing with an old textbook.
Hey, look at what I have. Except
Ah,
My eyes are normal, but
Your eyes are normal in your place.
I didn't purchase it. That was a freebie that my friend threw in. But yeah, my copy is playable and not warped.
I'll get into my final question, the one we've all been waiting for, and your feelings about compilation albums.
Just in general, just what
As
are
far as
good, bad, indifferent.
like what's a compilation album gotta have if you're gonna buy a compilation album, especially when you get into bands, you and you get into I'll say this. I'll say greatest hits, best ofs, whatever you want to call them,
Hmm.
can be good for getting you into a band.
Yeah.
Like say you had a ACDC best of, which they actually never made as many live albums as they never had a greatest hits album. Um, so let's say ACDC's greatest hits is what gets you into ACDC, right? And then you start buying some of the CDs, records, whatever. Something happens, your collection gets wiped out. Um, and then you got to rebuy stuff again. Are you rebuying that compilation? If now that they have a lot of other good songs on the full albums, are you buying that
Yeah.
compilation now?
Okay. So, um, one of the earliest comps I remember getting was a cassette, and it was one of those ones that you probably find in a truck stop, gas station, and it had Anthrax. I was already familiar with them. It had Wasp, Thin
That's
Lid,
that's different.
Scorpions, but it was songs. It was songs that I wasn't familiar with, so I knew "Rock You Like a Hurricane," but here I'm hearing another piece of meat. Wasp, I was hearing Manimal from the live album, and that album I own all those bands now, except every song that I heard. It may have taken years, but I eventually tracked down all of those bands and the albums that those songs were on. I've occasionally I'll pick up a comp. Like I've gotten two from my friend Joe that are Japanese comps, so I'm not familiar with the majority of the bands. Now, have I run out and got picked up the albums from those bands? No, they're not really those songs really not over. But another example was picking up some death metal like Nuclear Blast Comp, and Benediction, Mortification, just a bunch of bands that were on that label. Deceased. That's
Right.
where I found out about all those bands. Hypocrisy from Sweden. That comp just opened my world up. I already listened to Obituary. I think I had explored Entombed, but the comps, if you're not familiar with the genre and you want to explore, uh, if it's a good comp, if they're putting good songs on there and if it's good bands, then it's worth the money.
That was a little different because I'm really mainly speaking like a specific band, like best of greatest hits thing. Because I
Oh,
actually
okay.
I have a couple of the Metal Massacre comps. I've got the Hearing Aid comp that I got from Ron. One of the Metal Massacres I got from him. There's a comp I've got called Power Chords, which I have just about all the songs on that on the records themselves, or at least the CD. So that's different because that kind of gives you like a vinyl playlist almost. You
Yeah.
know, the
So
first by
or greatest hits, I like if Priest came out with the greatest hits. At this point, I'm not going to buy it. Now they released a couple of years ago the Reflections 50 heavy metal years of music, and it's just a mishmash of live songs. That yeah, I was like I definitely
yeah,
want to.
that's essentially a live album. And
Yeah,
I will buy a band's live albums. I absolutely love live albums. One of the main things is I love going to concerts. And unfortunately, there's quite a few bands where I'll never get to see live, and like I never got to see Pantera live. I'll never see Sabbath live. Obviously, now with Ozzy passing. Never got to see Iron Maiden live. Never got to see Motorhead. I fortunately was able to get to see Priest. So their live albums are me being at their concert. For me. So I will absolutely I love live albums. Some bands, they've got five, six. I'll get all six of them. I don't care. If they got, that's a whole nother story, because you were talking about like how would you select the live albums that you buy. That's completely different. But one thing I want to say when it comes to compilation albums, so I'm not big on greatest hits compilation albums. Um, so Iron Maiden, I think in '98, put out Best of the Beast,
Yeah, I got that.
and in Europe it was a 2 CD set,
With Fire,
and
it had that one unreleased song on it, Virus.
Virus. Yep.
Yeah.
Um, but that was at the time where I was just getting into Maiden. So like that was a comp I used to help get me in more into other stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
now that I've started my collection back over, I probably wouldn't do that, or at the very least, I might buy the CD just for that song. But if they put out a vinyl pressing of it, I'm not going to do it. Even though it had like a live version, I think of "I'm an Ancient Mariner" was a live version of "Fear of the Dark," which is actually my favorite of the two versions. Um, but here's one that I absolutely recommend to anybody, and that's "From the Vault" by Metal Church. They put this out after the "Damned If You Do" album. I want to say it was not right after, like not like immediately after, but I want to say it was after Mike passed away. I don't think it was before, because I think they were trying to get some last things with him recorded out there, and so it's got side A has 4 new studio tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One of them is like a, I guess like a redo, conductor, redux, whatever the word redux means. I've never known what that redux meant. I seriously have never learned the
I
definition.
think it's like
Uh,
a revisit, just revisiting, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So you
it's
got
probably
John
like
Volume, no
next.
reason, conductor, above the madness. Side B is you've got damned if you do sessions, songs that didn't make it from that recording session. So
Yeah.
you Mind Thief, Tell Live Vision, False Flag, Instrumental, 432 hertz. Side C, you've got 3 cover tracks. You've got Please Don't Judas Me, Green Eyed Lady, and Black Betty. And
Yeah.
then side D, you have 2 live tracks of Agent Green and Anthem to the Estranged.
Yep.
So just because it's got some stuff that you've never actually heard,
Mm-hmm.
mi- minus the live songs, that's
It
a
makes
comp,
it.
a comp I'll get. You
Yeah.
know, I'm not going to get their best of when I've got the 7 albums that those songs are on. And a lot of the times, like I say, best ofs are a way to get you into a band, but a lot of times you'll find out that some of those songs on the greatest hits or the best ofs aren't even the best songs from those records. And why would I want to buy those songs again when I don't think half of them are their best, works?
Yeah. Greatest hits with heavy metal. Just, I mean, there's certain genres where it just doesn't really work.
Yeah,
I'm more inclined to get a greatest hits of Joan Jett or Lenny Kravitz. If I want to, if there's songs, a few handful of songs that I know of them and I like, I'm not going to go out and buy
I
all their
say
albums.
I do think there's a difference between best ofs and greatest hits, because greatest hits is focusing on what was a
What
hit,
did, yeah,
basically for
what made
the
money?
yeah. And best ofs, however, don't always equate that, especially with bands that really don't get radio play. Like one of the best of that got me into was Testament. There was a Best of Testament. It had an orange cover, and it went from the debut all the way up to Low. Those were the albums that it spanned. And so I guarantee you, most of those songs never made it onto any kind of popular radio.
Yeah, no.
So maybe some of them had music videos that they went with that were in like Headbangers Ball and stuff like that. But to me, best ofs generally kind of they're generally a sum up of a band that's a really good band but didn't get the popular traction, as far as like, they weren't a platinum selling band by any stretch of the imagination. You know,
Something I
Aerosmith.
want to point out about the best of, so that we have to keep in mind is, did the band have any part in it? And I'm sure there's times where they do, but there's other times where it's a contractual thing, or company, they've already moved on to a different company, but the company still has the rights to those songs. So let's say like Atlantic Records, they decide to pull those, a bunch
That
of the songs that
was
they
kind
do.
of basically what happened with so a year, maybe less, before Megadeth's The World Needs a Hero came out, they had a comp come out called Capital Punishment,
Yeah.
which was first like official greatest hits album by Megadeth. And it had at that time two new studio tracks, one of which made the album, the following album, during the Fugitive Mind. The other one, Kill the King, didn't make it to that record, but a live version came on the Rude Awakening double live album.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably rebuy Capital Punishment on CD, so I would have Killed the King, a studio version of it. But I wouldn't, go for it on vinyl or anything like that. But, you know,
And I wonder that song may have shown up on the box set that I referenced earlier, the War Chest. I'd
it
have to go back and
probably,
look.
because
Maybe.
that's a really good song.
Yeah, they've done great. Megadeth was during the '90s. They were kicking out the B sides. They had great cover songs, and kind of like Metallica, but there were some, I guess, maybe leftover songs that were almost as good, just as good, if not better, than some of the songs on their studio.
Iron Maiden had a compilation. I cannot think of what it was called.
Who is that?
Iron Maiden had a comp that was like B sides and rarities. It
Yeah,
had,
they took
had,
those from
it had,
the box
it,
set.
it had a picture of Eddie mooning people, where
Yeah.
you see the ass corpse, which I can never get out of my head now.
Yeah.
But like they would have like covers of like Cross-Eyed Mary and
Yeah.
some other like studio tracks that they made that didn't that either that
Black Eyed Bart. I loved that was one of my favorites from I think it was '88, where there's one of the guys is like talking like a little kid, and Bruce lets him on the bus, and he offers offers him a beer, and it's
on this like
funny.
it's like after a show um where I think Nick is complaining about something and was it something to Airy? What was it? Ode to Airy or
Yeah, him and Harris were getting into it.
into it? Yeah.
Her up.
He made me fuck.
Yeah.
But
I
there,
ended up getting the Made in the First 10 Years box set, and it was all the singles leading up to including Seventh Son, and it was two. I mean, those were all seven, or I guess original 7-inch and 12-inch singles. But it was the studio album, and then the B sides, and then at the very end would be Nick, and he'd do anywhere from like a 8 to 12 minute, just kind of discussion about the songs and about what was going on during the period. It's yeah, I need to break it out. Haven't listened to them in years.
now, what I will say is, if I don't have a CD or vinyl by a band, right, and it's something I have had in the past. So let's just say um, Metallica Master of Puppets. Um, I don't have a copy of it. A new version of it comes out with bonus tracks that are not demos of the songs already on there. If they're demos of songs that didn't depend on a later album, weren't from a previous album, not a live song from a previous album, like Miracle Man. There's a live version of that on the as a bonus track on
No
No
rest.
Rest. Don't really need to hear the same song twice on the same CD. But if there's songs that they were hoping to push to put on the record and then just never kind of saw that kind of light of day, 4 or 5 tracks like that, then yeah, I'll choose to get that over the original record than if it's just that and demos of stuff I've already heard before.
Yeah.
You know, like the Megadeth reissues on CD anyway. they had demo versions of stuff, and it was like, well, or they would have like an alternate mix or an instrumental version demo. No, I don't want that. Motley Crue did the same thing when they did the Crucial Cruise series of their first few albums.
Yeah.
There might be like an instrumental version of Wild Side. I'm like, okay, so do you think we're all going to be in our houses doing karaoke?
Or the whole album. I mean, like Dream Theater on that, where they'll, one of the bonus songs, the entire album instrumentally. And I maybe if I were trying to concentrate on something, needed something in the background, but
Right.
Most of the time I'm not touching that.
No, not with a 10-foot pole.
Put on Melmstein and listen to him go crazy, but that's those songs are meant to be instrumentals.
Thing between Steve and Nick was called Mission from Airy. That's what it was. That's what it was.
I've got a question I'll put out for the guys out seeing just with our recent topic. Does anybody know who which musician is currently in a band called Titanium Tarts?
I'm gonna use the restroom real quick.
Titanium Tarts. Can anybody name a well-known musician without looking it up on the internet? Now, I would not have been able to answer the question myself 2 months ago, but and if you do look it up, I won't hold it against you, but I don't have a prize to give anybody, so George says no. It's not a band that has released any albums yet. But you know the drummer.
Tart sounds like a robotic breakfast.
Well, think about titanium is a type of metal, and a tart. If you're not talking about like the sweet dessert, that's a term, derogatory term towards I guess a woman. Even though I think men were called tarts too. So instead of the word maiden, you got the word tart. Instead of you got, and it's a band that Nico McBrain is touring with down in Florida. He actually played just north of the town. I lived in Vero Beach. My parents live there now, and he played, I believe, up in Sebastian, which is literally 20 minutes from where my parents live. And they played, I think, maybe about a month ago, and they're doing Maiden songs. I don't remember which song it was. I think it was something from Somewhere in Time, and they sounded phenomenal. Singer, obviously, I don't think they're going to be doing any recording because are they going to, re-record Maiden stuff? But I guess Nico wanted to get out there and play, just not having a tour with the band.
That's interesting. Did
look them up on Facebook? They've got their Facebook page.
Did you know that Nico was actually on the first Pat Travers album?
I might have known that. I know he was part of
I bought it and looked at the credits section. Put the cancer stick down. No, I'm not going to. Come put it down for me. We all got to die of something.
So the Portnoy was a good guess, Ron, because obviously Portnoy's been in like 200 different bands at this point.
So here's an interesting thing, since the both of them are watching this. An interesting thing that my wife brought up that we could do for a video. She would be the Alex Trebek of this situation. She was thinking that we could do like a heavy metal Jeopardy with like Jeopardy questions, around like heavy metal topics and stuff. she would be the curator of all the questions. That way, nobody has the information beforehand. You know,
Yeah,
like
I've got a heavy metal trivia game in actually it used to be in my closet, but I think I've actually got it in here. Um, but I've never played it. Years and years ago, I looked at a few of the trivia cards, but I don't remember what any of them were. But yeah, I've never played it because I never had anybody to play it with.
well, you know what we could do? You could be the question asker since you have all the questions and answers.
So it's Heavy Metal Meltdown, the world's first heavy metal trivia board game. So like I said, I opened it up. I haven't played it. I don't. It may be something that everybody'd have to be present in the room to do. I don't know that we could do it, over the internet, but
Yeah.
maybe they can, come a day that you get a bunch of people together and get break that thing open and see who's the smartest of them all.
Or the least dumbest.
Dumbest, yeah. Uh, My wife always thinks that I'm a walking encyclopedia when it comes to music, metal, but yeah, there's a lot I don't. I know what I know, and there's a whole lot that I don't.
Oh yeah, there's way more that I don't know than what I do know. It's
Yeah.
like funny story earlier today. Um, my son and I were throwing around the football, which I never thought the day would ever come that he would want to, because he's never really been any kind of interest in sports. So we're and he's gotten to where most useless information. Yeah, it's useful to us. It may not be, it may not help you sign your mortgage or anything, but so anyway, typically whenever he comes over, he ends up borrowing some of my CDs, which is twofold a good thing. One, he's got great taste in music, and two, he's wants to listen to the physical form. Um, he obviously has access to you know more than we ever had as kids, but he was like, "Yeah, I saw this video on YouTube where it was talking about the origins of basically of what bands started, what uh, genres and stuff like that." He's like, I could show it to you later." And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, I'm the video. Like I already know all the stuff they would probably already say on that. Like, I don't think he realizes that once you get into a style of music, you're not just listening to the music. You research things. You go back. Obviously, you listen to what's going on in your time period,
Yeah.
because what's fresh and out there to you. But then when you find out who those bands' influences were, and you work your way backwards and stuff like that, and and then I ended up asking him. I was like, what led you to listen to the music that you listen to? And he's like, well, modern music sucks. I'm like, okay, that's true. But what I was really asking was like, how did you get influenced to listening to these things? And basically, he kind of narrowed it down to he would listen to one thing, and then you would get kind of like YouTube or Amazon Music. You get things suggested based on what you listen to, and kind of go from there. I was kind of a small part of me was hoping that he would say that I influenced him because I always play music all the time. So
Hmm.
that didn't happen. So that kind of burst my bubble a little bit.
That'll
But
come. He'll come out with that. I mean, my father was a huge influence on me, but he doesn't listen to metal. And my father doesn't listen to Sabbath or the Alice Cooper, or the heaviest thing he listened to was Led Zeppelin. But Zeppelin and Clapton, and of course any of the other country, which I rebelled against that in high school. But then years later, I found myself listening a lot of the stuff that my father played. So, but yeah, he'll come around. He'll acknowledge where he got his love of music.
well, and the funny thing is, like, so what he basically had was a playlist. And he was like, "Do you have any of this band?" And he would ask, basically if I had it on CD. I'm like, "Well, I have it on vinyl, but I don't have it on CD. Or I do have those on CD, or I don't have any of this." And a while back, he was asking me, I think he was probably going through his playlist when he was asking me, and he was like, "Well, do you have any Frank Sinatra?" I was like, "No." And he called me a weenie. because I didn't have any Frank Sinatra. I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. Like Frank Sinatra was even older than me. How
Yeah.
I was almost like a how dare you or how rude.
Sinatra was old people music when I was growing up. Now I've gotten a few. Once again, that would influence from my father, but yeah, that style. I don't, I don't have a bunch of Tony Bennett,
Right.
stuff like
Yep.
that. But yeah, sometimes I like listening to time period. So I that's to each his own. Everybody their thing. Some people they're very narrow. There's the headbangers that's all. And me, I depending on the mood, but yeah, you can't. That's funny. He was, he was ragging on you because you Frank Sinatra.
But I have Ray Charles, which I thought would get me some kind of points because he was asking
Yeah.
about. Like, yeah, I got a few of those.
Any
And,
Barbara Streisand over there?
and quite honestly, I think that metalheads in general probably had the most diverse tastes in music. We just mainly listen to metal. You know, like I don't know if you've ever watched Aaron the Metal Theologian. He had one of his videos. He was saying, when people ask you what you listen to, don't say everything. Even if you do listen to a little bit of all stuff, be like, well, I like this and I like this this as well, but this is my main thing. I'm mainly a metal, rock, and a punk guy. You know,
Mm,
I do like blues. I do like funk music and stuff like that. I'm not in that mood a lot, but it's something I can listen to. I dig some classical music, too. But I
mhm.
mean, that's just not mainly what I'm going to listen to. Those are things I have to be in the mood for, and I'm generally always in the mood for some form of metal.
Yeah. Yep. We got some comments on here. Ron wrote, "My parents influenced 0.0001% of what I listen to." So, and there are people that are like, yeah, that's the if parents are listening to oldies or what Vader music, things like that, and you just go the complete opposite. And then George wrote, "I listened to the '50s rock and roll because of my mom," and so yeah, I mean Elvis, Buddy Holly, and a lot of that also. And
And then
not just from my parents, but also from movies because you'd hear like
yeah,
Beach Boys and Johnny Cash. You hear that stuff. It's whether during the 80s, 90s, it would show up in TV shows and movies.
and then you get the added pleasure of feeling real ancient when the music you grew up listening to during your time period is played in the shopping market, or a bank.
Yeah.
Like okay, now that hurts. Like at first you're like, oh, I could jam to this while I'm shopping. And you're like, wait a minute. When parents were shopping, it was, oh, wait a minute. Oh no, now I'm the old person.
Yeah. We're the oldies station. We got like, foreigners probably considered oldies now.
Yeah, now Metallica and Guns N' Roses are classic rock, and you're like, no, it's not. It,
Yeah.
it's
I love
it
watching
was
Scott Waters get pissy with people or complain about people because they're calling, heavy metal bands
right.
soft rock or just rock.
Well, and then you've also got where people who think that what's out nowadays and maybe 10 years ago is metal and everything before that's just hard rock. Like my
Yeah.
son was like, because he was like, well, I think Sav is just pretty much a hard rock band. I was like, no, they basically started everything that's metal. And then he was like, oh, I thought Metallica did. I was like, no, 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 no.
No.
That's 13 years before Metallica. But that's also he's in his generation, but you know at least he's got people that are willing to teach him the right stuff. And I'm not going to try to make him feel stupid for not knowing, because how do you know something when you weren't part of that
Yeah.
time?
Yep.
I actually, funny thing is, so like you and I talked yesterday about, how I've got my collection sectioned off where I've got 70s metal, 80s metal, thrash, death, whatever. And I actually went through a list because what I had to compile was a chart sort of where every band was in each section for when my wife is trying to find something that she wants to pull. Because it used to be way back in the day, I just had it all alphabetized. Then I was like, well, if I'm trying to find this band and they're in the A section, I got to sort through ACDC and Aerosmith and all this other stuff to get to Aeon, you know. And so to me, it made more sense for me to have it the way I do. And then with Ron, I was like, I threw out a bunch of band names that I had in what I consider the hard rock category, and it's bands that I think a lot of people, especially people older than Ron and myself, people in their 50s and their 60s that have been listening to the stuff, back when they were sucking pacifiers and stuff, and we weren't even thought of. And it's like, so I at one point would have considered ACDC and Deep Purple hard rock, and so then like I just sent a list of band names to Ron, and Ron was like, "That's 70s metal, that's 80s metal, that's hard rock, that's 70s metal, that's 80s metal." And I think it's so hard for somebody who's grown up in the last 10, 15, 20 years because everything, um, production doesn't make heavy. It sounds like it does, but it doesn't. I think Sabbath has stuff that's heavier than anything that ever came out after it. First three, four records, Sabbath albums to me. And then Sabotage, which happens to have my favorite song of all time, not the Sabbath song, Symptom of the Universe. That's the heaviest song, period, in my mind. And there was no drop D to it. There's no double kicks. There's no blast beats. And none of that's bad. But what people have to understand is younger generation, and even me myself, kind of had to understand to a degree, was also that you know when metal really first started, it was in this amalgamation of jazz and blues and hard rock, acid rock, those kind of things. And what set it apart from those things was the heaviness of it. And um, there was a lot of give in certain bands because it was such a new thing, and it wasn't something they were doing consciously. It's not like these bands set up and said, we're going to create a genre called heavy metal. They just took everything they were influenced by, and whatever happened is what happened. So I like to say that I think Sabbath had the very first power ballad with Changes. Not the greatest power ballad in the world. It's the worst song ever written, in my opinion. But, I think that's where the original power ballad comes from. And so, there's a lot of kids out there that think if the album's not 10 out of 10, full speed, blasting stuff, that it's not a metal record or not a metal band. And that stuff was still in its infancy of getting formed, in the very early to mid 70s with Purple and Sabbath. Maybe the first record of Zeppelin, maybe parts of the second record. Um, some early Queen songs. I got Queen in my 70s metal. I'm not 100% confident that I'm going to keep them there. I got Zeppelin in my 70s metal, not 100% confident I'm going to keep them there. Um, but it's just a genre that wasn't completely getting itself. It was still in its infant stages. Like a baby isn't running at 3 months old. It's there's accidents, there's falls, there's spills, there's this, and you know still having a lot of different influences at that time that were folk based and blues based and jazz based and stuff like that. It's really not until the late 70s, early 80s where you get the metallic part of it. I think I often kind of like I say that Sabbath made it heavy and Priest made it metal because Priest sounded metallic.
It's the speed. They took the chords, they took stuff that Sabbath was doing and just amplified it. I think punk music might have had a small influence on on like the 80s Canadian metal bands, American, UK, the new wave of British heavy metal. I think there was a little bit of a competition to take that attitude of the punk rock and
Right.
what bit of speed was showing. Not fast, but there was it was faster than anything you'd hear on the radio. The Clash and Ramones
It was definitely more up tempo.
and so yeah, and so there was that natural progression to kind of speed things up. But Ron had mentioned, like you said, Deep Purple and another one, Uriah Heep, Alice Cooper, Kiss. Not a lot of Kiss doesn't really fall under heavy metal. It's more hard rock. God of Thunder, and of course Creatures of the Night. That area of the '80s there when Vinnie Vincent was in the band and influencing them. That was metal. If you compare that music
Right.
to a lot of the other bands from '83, '84, Kiss definitely falls under heavy metal too.
I think
Yeah,
what really, in my opinion, qualifies a band, especially in the early stages of being a metal band or a heavy metal band, um, because like you had some bands that would have what would be considered a heavy metal song or two, like Barracuda from Heart.
part.
That's a metal song, really.
Yeah,
It's got everything you really need for it to be a metal song. Is Heart a metal band? No. They had they I think that song and maybe a couple others that they had helped influence some metal stuff.
hmm
But it to me, if you're a band like Led Zeppelin and you've got Days to Confuse, which that's a heavy song, but then you've got like D. Snyder called Magical Tunes. Um, that's not metal. You know that's why I kind of have a hard time putting Zeppelin in there. They had a heavy sound ish, but um, I think part of it also is I think that especially early on, metal needed to have what set it apart from hard rock, in my opinion, was the kind of the doom and the gloom stuff, going into territory other bands weren't willing to go into. And
but
Zeppelin,
Zeppelin did that with a few of their songs that drawing a blank here on names, but their the Viking song, the one with they mentioned Thor, and it was they incorporated Lord of the Rings stuff in there, and I
yeah,
think both Deep Purple, earlier Deep Purple, so like when Gillan in the band, you know those first I guess four albums with him, a lot of what made them heavy was the guitar player, so Jimmy Page, Blackmore, but also the drummers.
yeah,
So if you take snippets of songs, some are very bluesy and some maybe even a little poppy, but there was enough hard songs in there that I think most people say yes, they're definitely proto metal because they were doing some of the same things Sabbath was doing. I don't know that anybody was borrowing from one another there because they were all based off of blues, but yeah, definitely it's the guitar playing that just the solos, um the feedback. Of course, that likens back to Jimi Hendrix. I've seen some of the other guys in some of the lives where they're throwing out bands and how far back you go where you can still say
I mean, is it Beethoven? At some point, and that's why I say, if a band had a song or two, I can't qualify that band as a whole as a metal band. Like early first three Uriah Heep records are straight up, the beginnings of metal.
yep.
I don't consider Steppenwolf a metal band because they had the word heavy metal thunder in a song. They were
Yeah.
talking about motorcycles. They weren't talking about, a music form. And especially in the 70s, early to mid 70s, being called a heavy metal band was a derogatory term. You didn't want to be called that because that was basically a musical slur, if you want to call it that. And then Priest was like, nah, we're a metal band. Like, we're embracing that term metal band. That's what we are. And they ran with it. They were the first band, kind of really, in my opinion, that, you know, wasn't going to be afraid of that label and embrace that label and, you know, however you want to say it, flew that flag, for metal back then.
I wanted to go back and read George's post from a few minutes ago. He wrote, "Can you imagine nursing homes in 25 years? We'll be playing Metallica and Slayer."
Nursing
Well, that's
homes
what. At least that's what
wheelchair.
we'll be requesting. We'll be
It's going to
like,
be mosh pits in our nursing homes.
or metal posters up on the wall.
I can't be the only one though that goes to a show and sees these kids doing these slam dance things and hopes one of them slips and falls. I try not to wish harm on anybody. I really do. But I'm like, man, if I get windmill kicked or punched, man, I'm just saying I'm not. I stay out of pits because I'm just not a very big guy stature wise anyway. So I try not to, be in that area. But man, if something comes flying and hitting me, man, I'm gonna lose all my religion, and it's not gonna be good.
Yeah, last time I went to a show, I got knocked. I was standing on the perimeter, not out of my own want to, but I was on the perimeter of a pit, napalm death, and I had some guy slam into me, knock me into another guy and his wife or girlfriend, and I was able to stay upright simply because I fell, landed into them. But yeah, that's I know what you're getting at. See, Ron wrote, "Look up Tim Brewer wheelchair mosh pit hour. It's hilarious."
I do like his bit about Iron Maiden being the Teletubbies for adults.
And then George wrote, "Broken hips everywhere."
I already broke mine
Your
once.
mosh.
I mean, um, it'll be wheelchairs and walkers in the pits, and yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll have bands like Billy Madison had for his graduating third grade. Will come in and perform. The little cover bands come in and play at the nursing homes.
That reminds me, I think there's a sequel to Billy Madison. I think my
Uh,
wife was a,
Ha- Happy Gilmore got the sequel,
okay, that's right.
and
Happy
it's
Gil-
only on Netflix, which I refuse to purchase. I have a hard time paying money to somebody who um, puts little children in a very predatory spot.
I don't know that I've heard about that, but I know who owns it.
They basically had this movie called Cuties. It basically was over sexualizing 8, 9, and 10-year-old girls, and I was
And
like, I can't. Plus, there's never anything that you actually want to watch on Netflix. Like there's, the meme says it'll let you type out the full name of what you want to watch before it tells you we don't have it.
yeah, yeah, it's pretty much at this point just shows that they've created. It's
Right.
their you know they've got their stuff on there.
Yeah. I'll wait till it streams some other way somehow before. Hey,
George wrote "living after 6 p.m." instead of living after midnight.
yeah.
It, it'll be a rework of a free song.
Instead of breaking the law, breaking my hip.
Yeah, Ron, my wife and I, we canceled our cable. It was well over 10 years ago. I still do streaming. I pay for most of it, but with my cell phone, I've got HBO Max. So occasionally I'll watch a series of something, but for the most part, yeah, the garbage that's on network TV. I,
Yeah. We've
I
got
say,
YouTube TV, and it's definitely cheaper than cable. And and then like for football season, she'll purchase the Sunday ticket, that kind of thing. And she watches like some reality shows that like. I honestly watch more TV at work than I do at home because um the shift that I work, it's hard for me to get into any. Like when I was working my last job, I was able to watch the nightly TV shows that I wanted to watch because all the residents would go to bed, and then I had control of watching, Law and Order and FBI and those kind of things. But then when you have grown ass adults that you controlling the TV for, and they don't really want to watch that. The TV is really not about you. It's for them. It's kind of I kind of watch whatever happens there, and then whenever I get home, I'll put a movie on Prime. Watch that before I go to bed. But Yeah, as far as like actual TV watching goes, I really haven't had uh, a good grasp on network television in a very long time.
Yeah.
A lot of the things they do now, they definitely couldn't have gone away with when I was growing up in the '80s.
Oh no. I recommend, if you guys haven't watched it, The Chosen. I've gotten through the first four seasons, and that's on Amazon, I believe. So of course you got to pay for that, but
Things about the guy that plays Jesus, as far as like what his actual faith is, and it not really biblically lining up. I haven't really done a whole lot of research on it. It's just things that I've been hearing. You
mm,
know, so I mean,
the
does
thing,
it really matter with him portraying the character as long as the script is biblically based?
yeah,
You know, I kind of feel like if to me it's like I feel that if you're going to be portraying a historical figure in a religious sense, I kind of feel like you got to have that faith and background. Like I had no issues with the guy who played in the Passion of Christ.
hmm,
That foundation, that's his belief. Um, Somebody doing it to kind of pad their their acting stats, I guess, so to speak. I'm not real big with that, but
that's understandable. And I know some people, they won't watch historical documents, like or movie documentaries, movies, if it's not 100% factual. And you know, I know that they're taking liberties on certain things, and there's what situations and conversations that are not biblical, but if you go into it knowing that, you're like, there's portions of it that are historical and can be backed up through the Bible, and then there's other that are what is
there's like
possible.
a scene where he calls James Big James, and you're like, that was not from that time period.
Yeah,
But I mean, I don't necessarily need to be so period specific in the dialogue. I just, to me, it's kind of like if a band is out there putting out faith based lyrics and they're doing it because they know Christian music sells,
yeah,
not they
mhm,
personally believe it. And I do understand some people will be like, well,
yeah.
as long as you get the message, does it really matter who you get it from? And I kind of think it does. To me,
Well,
I
I
think it does.
I brought that topic up yesterday when we were talking about the bands that do that with the satanic stuff. There's plenty
Right.
of them, like we said, they're not satanic. They're just doing it because they know it sells. But fortunately, there's also Christian bands, that either they weren't Christian but they got labeled it. You think of like Trouble, where I think I think there might have been one or two members that were, maybe they were practicing, maybe they just, believed in God, but they just decided to go that route with some positive lyrics, but they get lumped in. They become the white
Right.
metal,
I
and
don't
then
think
and then you
I,
get people
I
upset when music
Trump,
changes.
I don't think they did it on purpose to be fooling anybody. They
No,
just had some lyrics that aligned with his faith, and that's just kind of how the music went. And then they got thrown into that category, whether
yeah,
they weren't trying to. Whereas a band like As I Lay Dying, they were trying to go that route.
yeah,
Then
and
you come
that
up
because
find either
they can
you know
make money.
nobody was a Christian, or the biggest um, thing I hate to see is when you
Good night,
see,
George.
people deconstructing their faith. Like, what? No.
Yeah,
And then you find out, what, like the guy from the Newsboys, um, that had his whole situation going on, and stuff like that. So, and what really sucks about that is not just being like a fan of that band and feeling like you were betrayed about that kind of thing. It's that music has two general purposes. It's it's worship music on one hand, and it's also evangelical on the other hand. So
yeah,
a lot of people have become Christians by getting into Christian bands. Like I wasn't a Christian until I listened to this band, and now I've become one. And then you may have some people that are on the fence about a band, then find out this guy's done these things that are definitely unbiblical, and be like, see, I told you, wolf in sheep's clothing, all of them. He's
Yeah.
just the one that got caught.
Yep.
So that's a
And
sword
there's a
for us.
number of bands almost yearly I hear of at least one musician that all of a sudden says, "Oh, we were never Christian," Meanwhile, you look at their lyrics. So Ron was saying that even with Trouble, they the back of the album cover had scripture, or if you really dig into their lyrics, a lot, especially the first three albums, even Run to the Light. I wouldn't say that every single song, but there was enough there that you could say, well, somebody knows God, somebody knows the Bible, and they're basing their lyrics off what their beliefs or what they know. But then all of a sudden, a band changes, and they do something that's more secular, and all of a sudden, what happens is a lot of the followers of the band that were listening, I'm a Christian and I only Christian music, now questioning that those guys, oh, they left the faith or they were never Christians, and that that
Like,
worries me. I hate that
like
happened.
what was his name? He just passed away. The former singer of Vengeance Rising, um,
Yeah,
Roger
Martinez.
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 Yeah. So there was a big deal where he went from believer to atheist to Satanist.
Yeah.
You know, I think our live restarted.
Did it restart?
Yeah.
Yeah, and still showing. The time says 111, and but
Mine has a new the 27 seconds.
oh well, mine's
So
so you
that
got to restart, but mine's still
maybe
going. But
tell me if we need to go ahead and wrap it up so you'll be able to upload it in 6 years.
yeah, and I really don't like to hear All right, man. So we will do this again some other time.
Yeah. Yep. Excellent.
Good night, Ron. Thank you for showing up and hanging out. And I did look at most of your comments. Yeah, Ron saying that the sound's all wonky.
Yeah. A little bit. Every once in a while you'll freeze up a bit. I don't know if I do either, but
I've got a terrible echo. All right, guys. Speak to y'all soon.
later.